History loves its tales of valor, but hidden in its margins are surrenders so ridiculous, they feel ripped from a farce. These weren't hard-fought last stands. They were collapses sparked by missing tea, toilet breaks, and sheer idiocy. Forget glory, these are the moments when armies crumbled like soggy paper, leaving behind legends of scandal, blunder, and darkly comic defeat. Number 1. Surrender over tea, the fall of Singapore. On February 15, 1942, Lieutenant General Arthur Percival surrendered the British stronghold of Singapore to Japan, marking the largest capitulation in British military history. Over 85,000 British, Indian, and Australian troops gave up to a Japanese force half their size, despite having superior supplies, artillery, and fortified positions. Why? Morale had completely collapsed. Japanese forces had cut off the island's water supply, but what really broke the British resolve was something more subtle: the loss of tea breaks. British soldiers were famously accustomed to pausing for tea at 4 p.m., and when shelling disrupted their routine, discontent spread like fire. Troops reportedly grumbled more about lack of hot tea than enemy fire. Even officers were described as bewildered and exhausted, unwilling to mount organized resistance. Winston Churchill called it the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. Some even alleged that Percival refused to dig in or counterattack simply because the enemy came from the jungle, something he never thought a gentleman would do. Singapore fell in just 7 days. The British Empire's aura of invincibility vanished over what many joked was a failure to boil water. Number 2. No toilets, no will to fight, the siege of Port Arthur. The Russian general who gave up, before reading his own supply reports. During the Russo-Japanese War, the Russian-held fortress of Port Arthur was considered one of the most impregnable positions in the East. But in January 1905, General Anatoly Stessel shocked his own officers and the world by surrendering the port to the Japanese, without ever checking his ammunition or food reserves. The surrender followed months of siege and shelling. Conditions were harsh, but the fortress still had enough guns, rations, and reserves to hold out for weeks, perhaps even months. Yet Stessel, reportedly demoralized by poor sanitation and the stench of overflowing latrines, waved the white flag prematurely. A later audit revealed over 87,000 shells, ample food, and freshwater tanks still full at the time of surrender. Japanese officers were stunned. Russian soldiers were outraged. Back home, Stessel became a national disgrace. He was arrested, tried for cowardice, and sentenced to death, later commuted by the Tsar. A quote from one captured officer summed it up: "We were not beaten. We were flushed away." In this case, the toilets, not bullets, broke the spirit of command. Number 3. A one-man army defeats Luxembourg, the surrender of 1940. The Wehrmacht conquered a country without firing a shot. On May 10, 1940, Nazi Germany launched its blitzkrieg across Western Europe. That morning, a single German motorcycle patrol crossed the border into Luxembourg. The Grand Duchy's military consisted of just 425 soldiers and no standing army capable of resisting invasion. But what shocked observers was how quickly the nation caved. The German biker was met by token resistance from local police, but before noon, the entire government had fled and surrender was declared. Not a shot was fired. No formal battle took place. The Luxembourgish cabinet claimed they had no choice, but critics later pointed out that no attempt at mobilization had been made. The Germans installed their own administration by dinner time. Luxembourg was absorbed into the Third Reich within days. Local newspapers referred to it as the quietest conquest in history. Others were less kind. British satirists dubbed it the nation conquered by a guy on a moped. Number 4. Panic in Perfume, the surrender of Fort Detroit. They didn't fire a shot. They just handed over the keys. During the French and Indian War, British forces were closing in on Fort Detroit, held by the French. But in a bizarre twist, it wasn't British cannon fire that broke French resolve, it was a rumor. French commander François-Marie Picot de Ballester heard that a large group of Native American warriors was accompanying the British, and supposedly conducting gruesome tortures. The French garrison panicked. Officers reportedly passed around strong-smelling salts to calm fainting soldiers. Civilians packed up their valuables. And before the British could even launch a formal siege, the French waved the white flag. The British, somewhat confused, accepted the surrender without a single shot. Later accounts suggest that the Native American contingent had not even arrived yet. Leicester was ridiculed even by his own allies. One British officer wrote in his journal, "The French gave us the fort and their dignity in the same basket." What was once a key defensive outpost in New France was now handed over because of an imaginary massacre and poor nerves. Leicester would later be captured again in 1775, proving some people just shouldn't be in charge of forts. Number 5. A city surrenders to a ghost army, the fall of Magdeburg. We didn't see any French troops, but we imagined a lot. In the autumn of 1806, during the Napoleonic Wars, the fortified city of Magdeburg was defended by over 24,000 Prussian troops under General Franz Casimir von Kleist. The French army, under Marshal Ney, approached the city but did not immediately assault it. Instead, they set up a loose blockade and waited. Inside the walls, rumors ran wild. Napoleon himself was coming, French artillery could level the city, reserves would never arrive. But none of this had actually happened. Kleist became increasingly paranoid and refused to engage in any offensive operations. Then, without consulting his officers or demanding terms, he surrendered the entire garrison on November 8, 1806. The French, stunned, marched in to find full food stores, working cannons, and confused soldiers who had never even seen battle. Ney later wrote, "Had they waited a day longer, we might have left from boredom." The surrender caused an uproar in Prussia. Kleist was court-martialed and dismissed in disgrace. His soldiers never forgave him. In one diary, a sergeant wrote, he feared a phantom army more than he trusted his own. Number 6. Surrender by calendar, the fall of Quebec. You mean, we didn't have to give up? In 1629, during a lesser-known conflict between England and France, British forces under the Kirke brothers arrived at Quebec and demanded the city's surrender. The French governor, Samuel de Champlain, outnumbered and cut off from supplies, agreed. Champlain surrendered Quebec to the English on July 19, 1629, ending French control in the region. However, several months later, both sides received word from Europe. A peace treaty had already been signed in April, and the war had technically ended 3 months before the surrender. That meant the British seizure of Quebec was illegal, and Champlain had capitulated for no reason. He was mocked in Paris for surrendering to a rumor and a delay in the mail. In 1632, the territory was returned to France, but the embarrassment lingered. Champlain later wrote bitterly, "Had I known the state of diplomacy, I would have rather eaten my shoe than given the city." Historians often cite the Quebec surrender as one of the most pointless capitulations in colonial history, brought about by bad timing and slow ships. Number 7. No hope for dinner, the Spanish capitulation at Messina. We would have fought, but the kitchen was closed. During the War of the Quadruple Alliance, a Spanish garrison held the city of Messina in Sicily. The British fleet, under Admiral George Byng, was preparing for bombardment, but before a single cannonball was fired, the Spanish commander offered unconditional surrender. Why? One British observer noted that the Spanish officers were exhausted from the heat, had no prepared food, and felt there was no hope for proper dinner or bath. A letter from a Spanish captain confessed that soldiers were too hot, too hungry, and not inclined to heroics. No siege, no battle, just no supper. The British accepted the surrender and found the Spanish troops calmly folding their uniforms and asking for rations. The Spanish commander's decision was later mocked across Europe. British satirists dubbed it the surrender of the stomach. Spain would lose all of Sicily in the campaign, partly because a few officers didn't want to miss their evening stew. Number 8. The fort that fell because of a tantrum. Tell the French they can have it. I'm too sunburned to care. When French troops invaded Ottoman-controlled Algiers in 1830, they expected a long siege. Instead, the city's powerful governor, Hussein Dey, surrendered the capital after just 3 weeks, and historians still argue over why. One popular theory, backed by French correspondents, suggests that the Dey had grown infuriated with his own subcommanders, who were disorganized and constantly argued over supplies. Combined with sweltering summer heat, spoiled food, and lack of functioning toilets, Hussein Dey threw up his hands and told the French envoy, "Take the city if you want it. Just get out of my face." The French accepted. No major fighting occurred inside Algiers. The Ottoman military elite quietly left, and the city passed into French colonial hands for 132 years. Historians refer to this as a boredom surrender, where psychological fatigue, heatstroke, and administrative dysfunction were more powerful than bullets. Number 9. The Netherlands surrendered after one bomb. One bomb was enough. The rest, we imagined. On May 14, 1940, Nazi Germany threatened to level the Dutch city of Rotterdam unless immediate surrender was offered. In the chaos of diplomatic back and forth, the Luftwaffe bombed Rotterdam anyway, killing around 900 civilians and destroying much of the city center. Rather than resist or relocate command, Queen Wilhelmina fled to Britain, and the Dutch army surrendered the next day. However, records show that German troops had not yet entered several cities, and the Dutch military was still intact in parts of the country. What triggered the surrender was not military defeat, but a fear of what might come next, mixed with horror from the single bombing. Churchill was reportedly dismayed, "One bomb and they folded like a curtain." Though the humanitarian cost of resistance would have been high, critics argued that the surrender came too swiftly, driven by shock and anticipation, not battlefield necessity. Number 10. The surrender triggered by a lost dinner invitation. The letter said dinner. The answer was capitulation. In September 1940, during World War II, Japan issued an ultimatum to French Indochina, demanding access to bases in northern Vietnam, Tonkin. The French governor Maurice Martin sent a message to Tokyo requesting clarification and dinner negotiations. The Japanese response? A minor skirmish, followed by loud threats. Governor Martin, flustered and unprepared for combat, believed the Japanese would launch full invasion. Instead of preparing defenses, he reportedly misread a translated message suggesting prepare for evening engagement as a formal dinner invitation. When troops heard fighting in the distance and no formal instructions arrived, they assumed surrender had been ordered. By morning, all French forces in northern Indochina had disarmed, and the Japanese took control without a full-scale battle. Later analysis revealed that the French chain of command had been paralyzed by language errors, logistics confusion, and a misplaced dinner memo. Some called it the most polite surrender in history.